The news spread like wildfire, and it did not take long before every corner of the entertainment world was buzzing. Dylan Wang's agency had finally broken their silence, and what they confirmed left everyone gasping. The breakup with Shen Yue was no longer rumor or speculation, it was official. And while some hearts shattered, others were quietly relieved. Among those reactions, the one that stood out the most was Bai Lu's, and it was not hard to see why. The agency's statement was cold and professional. They mentioned personal differences, a desire to focus on career growth and mutual understanding, but between those carefully chosen words, fans could hear the silence that screamed of hidden pain and unspoken stories, the weight of years of speculation, the whispered tales of midnight calls and fleeting glances was suddenly replaced with a single truth: Dylan and Shen Yue were no longer together. Yet while many fans mourned, Bai Lu seemed to shine with a happiness that was impossible to ignore. She was spotted stepping out of a rehearsal studio that very evening, dressed in a casual yet radiant look. The cameras caught her smiling ear to ear, her steps light, as though a heavy cloud had finally lifted. She even waved at the reporters who rushed toward her, an unusual move for someone often private and cautious. What was she smiling about? That became the question on everyone's lips. Rumors swirled instantly. Some said Bai Lu had always known the storm was coming, and she was relieved it was now behind them. Others whispered that her joy had a deeper meaning, that perhaps Dylan's future was about to take a different turn, and she was somehow part of it. Later that night, an exclusive dinner gathering became the center of speculation. Several familiar faces from the industry were seen arriving, but it was Bai Lu's appearance that sent social media into overdrive. She arrived in a stunning black dress, glowing under the restaurant's soft lights, and she was not alone. Moments later, Dylan walked in. His expression was calm, almost unreadable, but the tension in the air was undeniable. Fans immediately began dissecting every move. Bai Lu's laughter echoed across the dining hall. Dylan glanced her way more than once, and though he tried to mask it, there was a softness in his eyes that cameras captured perfectly. For some, it was proof that Dylan was finally free to look at Bai Lu without restraint. For others, it was just a coincidence. But the way Xiao Zhan, who was also at the dinner, froze when Bai Lu reached across the table to fix Dylan's cufflinks said more than words ever could. The night did not end quietly. After the dinner, Dylan and Bai Lu were spotted leaving separately, yet within minutes of each other. Paparazzi noted how Bai Lu's smile only grew wider as she stepped into her car. Some fans claimed she even whispered a thank you under her breath, as though the universe had given her exactly what she had been waiting for. Back online, hashtags exploded. Dylan and Shen Yue breakup, Bai Lu's happiness, Dylan Bai Lu dinner, Xiao Zhan reaction. They dominated trends across multiple countries, and comments were a battlefield. Some mourned the end of Dylan and Shen Yue's chapter, while others celebrated what they believed was the beginning of something new. Between it all, one question kept rising: why was Bai Lu so happy? The following day, things only grew more dramatic. Bai Lu was asked directly during a promotional interview about her radiant mood, and though she avoided naming Dylan or Shen Yue, her words left everyone shaken. She said, "Sometimes happiness comes when the truth finally finds its way into the light. I think it is important to embrace it when it arrives." Those words set the internet on fire. Fans dissected them, replayed them, slowed them down. They swore her smile at that moment was not just casual, it carried weight, it carried history, and it carried an unspoken promise. As the days unfolded, Dylan remained quiet, but silence only fueled the speculation. Shen Yue, on the other hand, was seen leaving an airport, her face hidden behind oversized sunglasses and a mask. Reporters shouted questions, but she did not answer, not even once. That silence itself became a statement, and it was clear the chapter had ended with more pain than peace. Meanwhile, Bai Lu's joy did not dim. She posted pictures on social media, her captions simple and cheerful, but every word was read as a hidden message. Some fans pointed out that she posted a photo of the sunrise the morning after the agency's statement, "New beginning," they said. Others noted she wore the same bracelet Dylan had been spotted with a year ago. The pieces kept adding up, and fans kept connecting the dots. It was no longer just about a breakup, it was about what came after. It was about the way one person's silence could create heartbreak while another's happiness could spark endless rumors. And in the middle of it all, Dylan Wang stood between two stories: the past that had just ended and a future that everyone was desperate to know. This was not just celebrity gossip anymore, it was a saga with more twists waiting to unfold, and as the world kept watching, Bai Lu's happiness continued to shine like a mystery waiting to be solved. One thing was certain: the end of Dylan and Shen Yue's story had become the beginning of another, and Bai Lu's radiant joy had just written the first chapter of it. The silence of the announcement still lingered in the air, but Bai Lu was already living in a completely different rhythm. For weeks she had been keeping her distance, staying quiet while the storm between Wang and Shen Yue built higher and higher. She knew the moment would come, the moment where the agency would finally step in and clear the air. What she did not expect was how freeing it would feel, how every breath after the confirmation felt lighter, brighter, almost as if she had been carrying a hidden weight all along. The very night the news dropped, Bai Lu was seen stepping out into the city lights, her smile radiating in a way no one had witnessed in months. The cameras caught her walking confidently, dressed simply, but glowing with an aura that turned the quiet street into a stage. Fans noticed instantly. They began flooding the internet with questions. Why was she so happy? Why did her eyes sparkle, as if she knew something no one else did? Inside her private circle, however, the story ran much deeper. Bai Lu had been aware of the tension between Dylan and Shen Yue long before the public suspected. She had seen the cracks forming, had felt the cold distance even during public appearances. And though she never spoke about it, the truth weighed heavily on her heart. She had been there for Dylan in the quietest ways, when no one else could reach him, when silence was his only language. To finally see the breakup confirmed was not a cruel victory, but a moment of release. It meant she no longer had to wonder, no longer had to hold her feelings in the shadows. That night, close friends revealed, Bai Lu invited only a handful of people to a quiet gathering at her home. She laughed freely, toasted softly, and for the first time in a long while, she did not hide her happiness. But in the middle of that joy, her phone buzzed. The name on the screen froze her for just a moment.
Dylan.
He had not called her since the storm began, and she almost thought he never would. With trembling hands, she answered, and on the other end, his voice was heavy, low, filled with a mixture of relief and uncertainty. He did not mention Shen Yue's name. He did not talk about the agency. Instead, he asked the simplest question, one that shattered the walls she had built for so long. Were you happy when you heard? Her silence spoke louder than any words could, but he waited. She walked to the balcony, the city lights reflecting in her eyes, and finally whispered, "Yes. Not because you broke up, but because you are free now." Those words hung in the air, raw and powerful, making Dylan silent for several moments. On the other side of the call, he closed his eyes, remembering the countless nights when Bai Lu had been the quiet strength behind him, the person he never dared to lean on because the world expected him to stand tall beside someone else. For the first time, he realized she had been waiting all along, not with demands, not with pressure, but with patience. The call lasted hours, long into the night, filled with pauses, confessions, and laughter that felt strangely new but also familiar. Every sentence was a thread, pulling them closer. Every unspoken memory was a bridge being rebuilt. But the story did not stay hidden for long. The next day, insiders began leaking small details, whispers that Dylan had spoken to Bai Lu immediately after the agency's statement. The speculation grew like fire, and soon the internet was flooded again. Fans were divided. Some rejoiced, calling it destiny. Others accused Bai Lu of smiling too soon, of moving too quickly. Yet no one could deny the visible glow in her eyes, the kind of happiness that cannot be staged. And then came the most shocking twist. Xiao Zhan, who had stayed completely silent the day before, finally appeared at an event. He was asked about the situation, his reaction, and whether he had spoken to Bai Lu. Instead of answering directly, he simply paused, gave the faintest smile, and walked away without a word. That silence was more powerful than any statement. It left everyone wondering. Did he know something? Was Bai Lu's happiness tied to more than just the breakup? Was Dylan about to make a choice that would change everything? Behind the cameras, Bai Lu's world was shifting rapidly. She was no longer just the bystander in someone else's story. She was standing in the center now, her every gesture magnified, her every emotion dissected. And yet, she carried herself with grace, refusing to let the noise shake her peace. She knew the road ahead would not be easy, but for the first time in a long time, she was not afraid. The world had watched Dylan and Shen Yue's story crash into silence. Now, they were about to watch something new rise from its ashes. Bai Lu's smile was not just happiness. It was a signal. Something was beginning.